but you'll get to see him today full blown. Please welcome to his first CRS, Luke Bryan.
How we doing, CRS? Y'all doing good? Thank you, Mike, for getting me up here and bringing us on. And we'll go on and thank Trace Atkins for giving us a little bit of the stage. So y'all just sit back, enjoy your chicken and whatever they serve you. And we're going to play you some country music. So. Rough, not soft, to come and warm you up in that cold hay loft. Let me hold you, little darling, in my big strong arms. Can't get these kind of muscles anywhere but a farm. Hey, I'm a country man, a city boy can't do the things I...
Hey, good morning and happy Friday. My name's Andy Denmark. I'm with the United Stations Radio Networks, and I am a CRB board member, here to do a couple of announcements before we start with this session. First of all, we'd like to thank the Big Machine Label Group for their long-standing partnership with CRS. Once again, Big Machine is hosting Friday's Showcase Luncheon, that's today, at noon in the Broadway Ballroom. That's going to have performances by Rascal Flatts, Brantley Gilbert, Riley Green, Lauren Jenkins, Noah Schnacky, and it'll be hosted by BMLG President and CEO Scott Borchetta. We greatly appreciate their commitment to country radio and for the countless hits we can't stop singing from the Big Machine Label Group. Thank you, A Big Machine. We'd like to acknowledge the ACM and St. Jude's Children's Research Hospitals, who are both longtime friends of CRS. Once again, we are pleased to have them both as sponsors of the New Faces Country Music Show, where CRS will feature the top 5 hottest acts in country radio, voted on by you. We're grateful for the continued support here at CRS of ACM and the St. Jude's Research Hospital. We'd also like to remind everybody that recordings of the sessions here at CRS are available for purchase at the exhibitor hallway, which is right near the registration desks. You can let us know how the convention is going, how we're doing, what suggestions you have. You can rate panels, all of that on the CRS app. You can rate things immediately after a session, and then by participating in that, you have a chance to win a CRS 2020 free registration. Please, if you're not going to go to the New Faces show tonight and you have a ticket, please don't leave Nashville with an unused ticket. You can turn that in at the registration desk, and they will make sure that it goes to someone who's kind of on a waiting list for that sold-out show. So again, if you're not going, please turn your ticket in, and somebody will be happy to use it. And of course, before the session starts today, we want to remind everybody to put your phones in some sort of silent or vibrate mode. This panel is about the hidden demo, adults 25 to 34, and I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, one of the most gifted programmers in the country format, Mr. Bruce Logan.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope everyone had a wonderful Valentine's Day. We appreciate you joining us today. Welcome to the Hidden Demo, adults 25-34. In this panel, there seems to be a perception of doom and gloom about radio consumption in a mobile world, and especially among the younger end of the demo. But the facts and the data tell a little bit of a different story, so we've put this panel together for you called the Hidden Demo, and we hope to provide the latest insights into current radio consumption trends and also give you hopefully some ideas for success as you head back to your markets that you guys can go work on to help cultivate future listeners. Like I said, we hope you walk away with some great ideas today on some ideas that can help continue the sustained dominance of radio in the future. So we've got a really great panel for you today. The Vice President of Audience Insights for Nielsen Audio is with us. John Miller is here. Alpha Media Director of FM Programming, Mr. Scott Mahalik. Fan club, he'll sign autographs afterwards. And also the Vice President of Market Strategy for DMR Interactive, Doug Smith, is with us today. We appreciate you coming up. As you know, as we go through this, we've got some slides we want to show you here to start off with. But once we get to that, once we get through those slides, we will open the floor up. Your questions are, quite honestly, what's going to make this a great panel or not. So we really do want you to step up to the microphone if you have questions for anyone on the panel. But as we get started to show you some of the data, I want to welcome John Miller.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us here. We're going to set the table for today's discussion by talking about what we know about how people are consuming radio from both Nielsen and a couple other sources. Here's the reach graph that everyone talks about. It's a big topic of conversation. We know that radio reaches more Americans every week than any other platform. That's the built-in tonnage that radio has. Things are, of course, changing, right? The audio landscape is evolving and changing, and fragmentation is happening. But currently, most Americans use radio, and that's everybody 18 plus, and also the lighter green on here is 1834, 91%, right? 9 in 10 18-34-year-olds use radio every week. That's ahead of TV, slightly ahead of smartphones and other platforms as well. So the tonnage is there. This is why radio is successful, has been successful, and makes a lot of money for a lot of people. When you talk about audio, we have to bring in a couple other data sources to really give us the best landscape. We can look at radio again at the top. We can look at streaming audio on your devices like smartphones. You can look at tablets and also satellite radio. And the same thing holds true here, right? Radio has the tonnage. Americans use a lot of audio every single day, and radio is still a big part of that media diet. Let's turn our attention to country specifically. We're going to talk today about 25 to 34, which is the right side of the screen. But what we did here is we took a look at the two base components of 18 to 34. That's 18 to 24 on the left and 25-34 on the right. And what we're showing you here is the composition of audience. So what percent of the total country audience came out of these demographics? And we've compared 2007, when the iPhone was invented, so the dawn of smartphones, to 2014 in the middle, which was country's high watermark for ratings. The format was setting records all over the US for shares and things like that. And then today, or last year, in 2018. And what you can see is that the composition of the country audience has remained pretty consistent. There are about as many 18 to 24-year-olds and 25-34-year-olds using country today as there were a decade ago. So things haven't shifted dramatically, and that's important to consider in today's environment. Now let's take a look at the hard data behind that. So here's the cum, the time spent, and the share for those different segments by year. And I'll shut up for a second and let you look at it. So here's what I notice. There's a lot more people today using country in these demos than there were a decade ago because population has grown and radio reaches everybody. So there's a lot of people sampling the product. Time spent listening is going down because of fragmentation. There are only 24 hours in the day, and so we are now fighting against all the other places that people can use audio. Share-wise, we're down from the 2014 high watermark, but we're still above where we were a decade ago. So there's a lot to digest and a lot to discuss, but these are the facts of who is using country and how long are they doing it each week. The last thing that I'll cover before I hand it to Scott is the subject of age and, more importantly, employment. What we know is that as you age, you generally get a job and start working, hopefully, right? And when you do that, you tend to use a lot of radio. You commute, you're out of home. Those are the key radio users. And you can see it here in this chart. This is breaking up the country audience by age. You've got teens all the way on the left. There's about 5 million teens that use radio every week. The next age group up is 18-24. The cum jumps to 7.5 million. And then to more than 10 million when you go up to 25-34. And in the middle, I know it's small font, I apologize, but in the middle of these bars are the weekly TSL. And take a look at what happens as you age and you start working. Teens use country about 4 hours a week. 18 to 24-year-old workers use it 6 hours a week. And it's almost the same for 25 to 34. So the takeaway here is that as you age and you begin working, you simply use more radio and you use more country. Scott, I'll pass it over to you to talk about a couple other data sources for us.
Thank you. And before I start this, there's a lot of data up here, and this is the reality of what it is. But I, this morning, would like to talk to you a lot, and you're going to hear me speak a lot about the why and how, because these are the facts. We can't really dispute that, really change it, but we can affect what we can do about it, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on that. And because I don't have my glasses, you're all lucky. I'm going to skim through this pretty quick this morning. And you
It
can
says
see,
audio source used in
yes,
car.
I do. I have got
Okay.
that. And so a lot of the information here that I'm going to share with you reinforces what you've seen earlier, but it also is a indication and reminder that the good news is radio, we're the original pioneers of mastering the audio communications format. And just because the delivery is changing doesn't mean that we can't still, we clearly have the home court advantage on being the very early pioneers of mastering the use of audio. So whether you're listening to it on radio, a CD, a smart speaker, whatever is to be invented now into the future in perpetuity, the fact that it's an audio medium is really key to this whole discussion, I believe, because as we'll get into later, why people tune into something really matters. And so really all of these things are forms of radio, especially the mobile device. If you think about it, radio, broadcast radio, is from 88.1 on the spectrum to 107.9. All these other devices, whether it's your cell phone, your wireless at home, are being consumed by radio, right? It's just a different part of the spectrum, and it's allocated differently. So think about that as we go through some of this information. These are the facts, again, of radio still at the top, but some of the different disruptors that have occurred through the course of time. CDs, they're going away, being replaced by MP3s and so on. Podcasts are new emerging forms of audio consumption. We'll go on here. Audio source used in the car, you can see where things are. And as the dashboard really develops, and I don't know if anybody's rented a car lately, but I have a hard time finding the radio. Like, I got to sit down and think about it and go, damn, how do I get to 88.1 to 107.9? There's so many other options, but they are forms of radio. And thank goodness some of in our industry had the foresight to be in the dashboard and be available, because this trend is here with us now. It's not like, we're thinking about it. It is here. And as we sit here today, one of the biggest, latest disruptors in growth has been in that smart speaker, right? 48% of homes have it. By this time next year at the CRS, it's predicted that 78% of the homes will have the smart speaker. The smart speaker is generally a radio. Not a lot of people are plugging it in. It's getting its signal from Wi-Fi. And when we're being smart broadcasters, we want to be, front and center to be a source on that. So think about that as far as audio sources go. These are the facts. Give you a minute to digest some of that, and we'll move on. Audio source, most used often in the car. You can see some of how the percentages are shifting. In the future, it's just obviously easier to consume different forms of audio. And as we get flawless connectivity on broadband, 5G is coming, satellite audio is coming, and we make it easier and easier to consume, you'll see a greater shifting of these sources because the hurdles to listen are going away. 10 years ago, who could plug a phone into their radio in their car and hear an audio source, right? So technology, it's convergence. The time is here where the technology and then the distribution is becoming easier, more reliable, and faster. And at some point in time, the protected class that we enjoy of broadcasters, of having that licensed signal from the FCC, will disappear. The good news is if you're a real talent and entertainer in this room, your stock is going to go way up because you're no longer protected by this special thing we have as a radio license. Now you're out on the audio consumption grid being consumed in a lot of different places. We still have the edge. I still believe that we're going to end up emerging as the winners because we've had, in the theory of recent trout, first in wins, radio started in the very beginning. We have the mover advantage, but we really have to keep up with it all. So there's some color on that piece. In summation here, well, AM/FM radio faces home hardware challenges, particularly among 18-34-year-olds. It does remain dominant medium in cars, which is great. We're going to talk a little bit about who's coming into the 1834 demo, not to mention the 2534 demo. We'll get to that a little bit later. The percentage of Americans who use social media is tapering off, led by the first ever decline in Facebook and so on. But you know what that is? That's fragmentation. And I want to see by the show of hands in this room, how many people have an app called TikTok on their phone? Good, a few. All right. Well, if you know what TikTok is, you know what's about to feed the under 25-year-old demo, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. How am I doing on the PPM teasing? Okay, hang in the room with me here.
Coming up in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Setting up an occasion. Good job.
So, you know, I mean, really that's where we need to be, you know, to set the stage for this conversation is 2534 is here and among us. We're measuring what they're doing, but we can't affect a lot of that because they're aging to 35, 36. What we can do is get in front of who's about to become 25, and we'll spend a lot more time on that. So that's all I got for now. I'm going to turn it over to the master here.
The one thing that I wanted to add to that before we really get into the nitty-gritty is the idea, it all depends on what your mindset is regarding all the data and everything that's out about radio right now with the younger demo. If your mindset is, we're screwed, then good luck. But if you're more of a positive mindset to say, as John was showing, you know, TSL is down, the numbers in the total audience, yeah, it's still there, they're listening a little less, but they're listening, meaning on the younger end. So there's still the opportunity to be creative and connect with them. So again, it's your overall approach. And I think what we're going to be talking about here is more that positive angle of saying, don't be negative. Think of it as we still have a shot. We're still there. Radio's still king. We just need to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more positive about how we connect with these folks that are younger as they're moving into the typical buying demo.
I'd like to remind you again that there are microphones set up at the front. If you have questions about the data that we've gone through, please come on up, stand there. We will get to your question and try to have the esteemed panel answer it for you. Gentlemen, kind of for the entire panel, as we went through the data and the slides, we know kind of through history that as the general population has aged, their use and passion for radio has typically grown. As they're become more settled, more adult, more responsibilities. But do we have any data now, because it is such a fragmented world and different, do we have any data that says tomorrow's 1824s or 2534s will not be behaving in that fashion?
Well, I'll take that. I think the first place to start is, you know, with the raw tonnage data. So we'll just leave it here. Right? There's still 7.5 million listeners every week to country radio specifically that are 18 to 24. And I showed you earlier that the teens is a little bit below that. So people are still listening, right? Radio is still accessible. It's easy to find. It's in your car. It's with your family and all the things that Larry and the great folks at Edison talked about yesterday. But fragmentation is a major force. 2007, there weren't these things around. They didn't exist, right? The iPhone had just been invented in 2007. That has changed everything. Smartphones have changed everything with how we all consume. You know, at Nielsen, we measure all the platforms, and we find that Americans are spending 10.5 hours every day using media across all these platforms. That's like half of your waking hours are used consuming media. So fragmentation is happening to all of us. TV is feeling the same way. Print is feeling the same way. I think the takeaway for us as radio is just because they're there now, just because they listen and sample and use country radio, that certainly doesn't guarantee they're going to in the coming years. And that's, I think, a big thing we want to talk about today.
I think the biggest part of that is, what do they come to radio for? You can get a song a million different ways. The one advantage radio has, and we've heard this ad nauseum over the years, it's the personality, it's that connection. And the air personalities and the talent are the key point of differentiation when it comes to radio. The younger generation are still entertained, but unfortunately it's coming from a little bit different platform. And the example that I use, I have a 15-year-old daughter. I live in Cincinnati, 4.5 hours up the road. You can do it in under 4 if there aren't many cops on the road. But last summer, her and 2 of her friends wanted to come to Nashville because a YouTuber was here. And it really hit me. And I'm thinking, I got into radio a long time ago because growing up in Cincinnati, I listened to Q102, WEBN, and it was a chance to meet those personalities. Man, I wanted to be there. Well, now it's still the same thing. There's a personality, there's a talent she's connected with. She wants to go 4 hours plus to go meet them, but it wasn't a radio personality. It was a YouTube personality. The key word there, personality. So there's still that connection that even though we're in our 40s and 50s, the same thing is going on with youth today that we faced. I got yelled at to get off my Atari 2600. Well, now I'm yelling at my daughter, put the stupid phone down. Okay, still the same issues, it just evolves into different platforms. So to me, it's the opportunity with all the fragmentation, it's for radio to look at their why. What can we do that Spotify, that Pandora, that they can't do, and it's that connection. So we need to give the younger personalities or the younger listeners that reason to tune in, that reason to want to connect with somebody and drive 4 hours plus to go get a picture with someone.
Here's another reason why we need to take action now and go deep on in supporting and encouraging our talents to do a better job, because at the end of the day, we're in the entertainment medium. And when you think about it, your daughter is going to YouTube because she's being entertained and she's being connected. Because in an industry, if I just in a broad sense say, there's periods of time. There was a period of time when talent and producing highly entertaining radio was forefront. There was a lot of investment in that. Deregulation occurred. We saw some technological efficiencies. And some of the things we cut off and we stopped investing in was developing talent, recruiting talent into our industry, developing talent, allowing talent to have space to express themselves. Midnight to 5 a.m. was a live day part in a lot of radio stations where people could get their, build their chops and have experiences. Now you can do that from your basement as a self-expressionist on a podcast or YouTube. And so radio has not spent enough time figuring out how to recapture, develop, and recruit talent. And you said earlier, when the Spotifys and Pandoras, they're this, we're that. I got news for everybody in here. If they ever figure out that they can go and pull the last remaining great talent off of radio, we're going to be left holding the bag. So if we don't start securing and developing new talent, there is no barrier to entry. These organizations could do this tomorrow, and they have multiples and billions of dollars compared to our industry. Money is not an issue. And so we really, really need to think about what used to be protected and secure for us is no longer there. There is no barrier to entry. Somebody could start pulling your talent away. And we see it migrate. Adam Carolla early on left radio way early on, created a podcast. That's a talent that has left our medium. There are other shows and stars out there like that. And if we don't become the star collectors and developers again, we are really facing a much, much greater issue. And so with that in mind, we're looking, Alpha Media, at establishing what will be I would like to say, a think tank or a brainstorm deal. It is open to academia, the entire industry, and everybody in this room will be able to communicate with you. And the hashtag is eggplant. That's our special project name for the think tank, because we do need to figure out what are we going to do that will turn the tide.
Well, as we start looking at that farm team, many of us who have gone through and tried to find new air talent, we know that the pickings are a little slim out there. So as you start looking for content creators of the future, where do you find that farm team?
Hashtag eggplant. The farm team, so for us, I'm just going to run through a little bit of a sort of breakdown of a recent hire. This is in Portland, Oregon. We have our country programmer, Mojo Roberts, in the front row here, so he was very involved in this. But we looked at, hey, where do you find new talent? We were getting lots of submissions. We turned to YouTube years ago and said, you know what? There's something unique about this person. Look at the number of followers and views. Could we train them to do radio? I'm not going to be able to train. I can't teach a personality. I can capture and train and bring in a talent. And we spoke to him. I had a phone call with a gentleman named Connor Franta from Portland, Oregon, big YouTube star now, moved to LA. And I said to Connor, I'd like to talk to you about doing nights in the top 40. Oh, radio. Ugh, you know what, man? No, I'm, movie. I want to be a star. And the conversation, it almost ended, and I said, well, let's talk about your career, millennial. And I said, hey, what do you think about, Ryan Seacrest? He's in a multimedia platform. He's in radio, television, award shows. I said, what if we could get you to get beyond YouTube? What if we could do some of these things? And he paused for a moment, and he said, all right, you know what? Let's talk about that. I said, technology would allow, it doesn't mean you have to be in the room for 5 hours every night. How long does it take you to produce what you produce? And we had this conversation until the agent got involved and said, hey, Connor's making about $700,000, $800,000 a year on YouTube. How much can you bring in for the night guy there? Okay. Move on. So
how about concert tickets? Would you like concert tickets?
Another young talent, a girl in Seattle, Washington named Cassidy Quinn. And Cassidy was on YouTube. And I shared with a friend of mine at a television station who was struggling to find up-and-coming talent. I said, take a look at her. And he did, and he said, she's very raw and green, but I think I could help give her some of the polish that we need in television. Took a chance, hired her, brought her into TV. Very quickly, in 6 months, went from this raw YouTube star to a pretty polished traffic talent, to then a host of a magazine program at night, to a correspondent who was at the Olympics, to, again, hey, let's expand. You have your blog, you have your video, you have your YouTube, you're on TV. What would you think about doing nights on the country station, Cassidy? You've already got a tremendous social following. You have unique, special things you do with fashion and lifestyle, and she's a very athletic, sports-minded girl. I introduced her to Mojo, and lo and behold, she's doing nights for us. So there's other places where we can find these kids. We just have to build that bridge. And my whole focus on this is just saying, let's secure these talents and make sure we have the vehicles, because we need to ask for the order. Like in the Edison study earlier, the kids are telling their parents and turning the parents on to things they're discovering. My God, the parents are leaving radio. We can't, we've got to stop. We got to put our finger in the holes in the dike before we completely lose it. And for me, it all comes back to, if you provide entertaining, outstanding talent. One of the other analogies I heard you use earlier was that your son listens to the Kid Chris show. Now that's on terrestrial radio, but is also a Spotify consumer, streamer, so on. Well, all right, what if Kid Chris was on Pandora, or in a way where it was no longer? He's seeking it out. In cable, there's 1,000 channels there. On satellite, 1,000 channels. What do people migrate to? They go to the great content. They go to the entertaining programs. Netflix. Think about all of the emergence. E-Tix, I think, is Amazon's new, or new play on content. People are seeking out great content. So I think we got to get our mindsets back to, if we're not delivering something like the Kid Chris in your example, to bring them to our platforms, where are we going to be? So that's my thought.
Remind you again, if you have questions, please step up. Your turn.
Thanks, sir. Big John with WDGG, Huntington, West Virginia, Kinder Communications Group. Speaking on tracking down new people to put on the radio, you're wanting to find personalities. We started a thing with the United States Army Recruiting Center in Huntington, which we cover Huntington, Ashland, Ironton, we're a tri-state area. We brought in a couple of the recruiters, and you know how recruiters are. They're just recruiters. They're kind of stiff, and it's recruiters. You're expecting that from the Army. We had one of the guys that stood out. His name is Sergeant Adam Camara, and he has become a Thursday tradition. They won't allow anybody else to come in because he's become wound in so much on our morning show. He's now part of our morning show on Thursdays. When he shows up, he delivers so much personality, and he's talking about recruiting and getting folks to join the Army. We've had a couple of major events, a couple of big concert events. I invited him to show up with us. He's taking pictures now when our listeners are going up wanting to get their picture made with him because he's part of the morning show. So we found a personality to integrate into our radio station. There are local people that you can find that will make a difference in how your station sounds. We're getting ready to launch a podcast. It's New Music with Molly. Molly is our promotions director at the station. She's so opinionated. There's certain artists she hates. There's certain artists she loves. But the podcast is New Music with Molly. We're going to do it with a morning show, and we're going to put this on our radio station, launch it from there. She's hilarious. She is so straightforward with music, but I think that's another way tracking people. If there's people around you, you just got to look and pay attention to what they do.
Yeah, great talent can come from anywhere, and I think that's a great takeaway for everybody because traditionally, for the people who have been in it for a long time, we know that those people used to find us, oh, I can't wait, I always wanted to be in radio. People aren't thinking that now, so our jobs have changed to find that talent in anywhere we can find them.
Yeah, I applaud you for that, by the way. I mean, we're at a point in time where, it's beyond the request line. We can interact with our audience in so many robust ways. And I think we touched on this earlier that, talent serves the purposes of being the companion on radio. That's another special thing. When you're listening to just a streaming service, or God forbid a station is just playing music without personality, there's nothing special about it. And so people use radio for companionship, interaction. They want to be part of a community. We have so many ways to reach out and interact through all the multiple social platforms, apps, and unlike any other time in history, we can get listening occasions out of that. We can communicate to the audience in a way that we never could before. And we owe that to technology, which is really, I think, a blessing as well as somewhat of a curse in terms of fragmentation. But, we're at a point where doing that and bringing those people in, and to your point, inviting people in that are just personalities. The YouTubers, we can teach them the basics of radio. What we can't do is bring a personality. In San Francisco, California, I was casting for a morning show, and I had a guy tell me, hey, you have to meet this kid named Eddie King. I go, okay, well, what does that tell me about Eddie? Look, when we're out at a party and you're at a table in a restaurant, the crowd is around Eddie's table. I go, well, what makes Eddie special? He's really funny and he's quick-witted. I think it could work on radio. Well, okay, I set up, so I meet with Eddie, and Eddie was working at a mortgage firm, and before that, he was a curator, interestingly enough, of the Wax Museum in New York. Radio, he listened to radio, but he was like, I couldn't be on the radio. I go, yeah, but Eddie, what's unique about you, and I hear, is this. So we went out into some social settings, had some dinners, and sure enough, Eddie owned the room. That's what we want to do. We want to own the ears. I said, Eddie, come on in. I've got a place for you on the radio. If you're not afraid of the mic and you can be yourself here in this room, in this ensemble, we're going to have some magic happen here. And sure enough, now he's considered a radio guy. But at the time, he was in a mortgage company. He was a friend to a lot of radio people where they were laughing their asses off. And lo and behold, so to your point, talent can come from everywhere.
I think Doug has a thought.
You may be in a diary market and sit there right now and go, YouTube is great trying to find somebody, but if I'm in market 200, I don't have anybody YouTube that I can go grab. But what Scott's point also emphasizes is that social media as a whole is a great pool to go fishing, because you get those people who are all about their self-expression. It's all about me. They want that spotlight. Maybe it's their Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat following, or that type of thing. They're like, look at me, and they have a voice. What great opportunity to put them, potentially, if they're good enough, but if you can coach them, putting them on the air. There's that local star again being able to cross over. And if you look at how video is so big on social media now. That's the biggest way people connect and everything. It used to be really polished, and folks had green screens, and they were super fancy. What resonates now is grabbing your phone, and maybe it's a little tilted, and it's a little fuzzy, but it's real. And that's that same thing where you're talking about personalities. They don't have to be that totally polished diamond yet. People like that authenticity. So looking at the YouTubes or social media, even on a local level, trying to find that talent that kind of has that ego to say, look at me, and they have some kind of a following, or they're posting and they really want to project their opinions and voice, and they have a personality, that's a great pool to go fishing in as well.
Here's a couple of ideas for you. No matter what size market you're in, the smallest market in the country, even if there's 50 people in that high school, these kids are all producing videos on their phones. They're socially media, they're active. Nothing's more local than high school sports. Depending on your city, between 80 and 85% of parents have kids involved in some sort of sports. Look at what those kids are posting for their schools. It could be the rally, could be football, could be girls soccer. Watch and see the collaborative efforts that those kids do. And in there, you will see the emergence of some of the top performers. As they say, the stars always rise to the top. The walkaway is, look at the hashtags, look at your market, and look across the spectrum, the different demos from high school up to the age of 25. You have stars in your market now that are the leaders in your community, whether it's in high school, the next level up, college, that you could look at and say, that is an interesting, entertaining person. Guess what? They've got their address right there for you to connect. I do it all the time. I direct message, I connect. It's unbelievable what you can do. And they'll respond. They're like, oh my God, somebody from the radio station liked me. Next thing, they're in your office. Next thing, they're on the air, and you're in business. And it doesn't matter what size market. Really, yeah.
I think we have another question from the crowd.
Yeah, Jamie Patrick, KDRK in Spokane, Washington. Question for you in regards to this talent search thing. Let's just pretend, okay, that you work with a conservative consultant and a frugal owner or CEO. What Jedi mind trick do you play on the consultant and the CEO on allowing you to go out and farm this talent that we're talking about? In Spokane, we've grabbed this deputy who's fantastic, but we've since stopped working for him because, well, he's not a radio guy. You know, that kind of thing. What Jedi mind tricks do you play on those guys?
Well, you could say, hey, we want, you found these people. They're probably making zero now. They're self-expressionists. They're out there because they love what they do. And you could go, this is a way for us to use them to help them endorse our brand and expand it to their community. So turn the tables on them and go think about it. If I get this guy involved with our radio station or our brand, they can then endorse by being part of and associated with us to their whole community of followers. And therefore, you almost have a built-in marketing solution, and you have a way that could bring potential audience and customers, because revenue, look, we're all revenue agents in this room in this day and age, to your radio station. And I would try to take that approach and reverse the way you're going at it. The end result is you want engagement, you want them involved. And if they can start helping you bring listening into your radio station, you can use them to endorse your brand to their following. You all help each other, and God forbid, maybe they become an endorser or could do something with revenue. Now you're in a new way to go about it. Just a thought.
There's the old saying that if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. But in radio today, if you do what you've always done, you're not going to get what you've always got. And I know that's really bad English, I'm sorry. So I think it's taking that approach. There has to be an evolution. And one analogy I use, if you're a sports fan, I look at the radio industry a lot like baseball, where if you hear baseball, the perception is, oh, it's old, it's slow, it's not as popular. Soccer's big, football's adjusted, the NBA's adjusted. You talk to baseball people, and they're always about Babe Ruth and Sandy Koufax and the way things used to be. And then you talk to a lot of radio people, and it's, well, the young ones today can't back time to ABC News and Doug Limerick at the top of the hour, or put a reel-to-reel back there, and let's have a splicing competition and all this. And, and trust me, I would go right now at that splicing competition. But we, and I categorize it, we like to talk about the old days, and if radio would be the way it used to be, it ain't gonna be. So I think talking to the owner or whatever, it's like, look, man, we have to evolve. We have to do things different. So taking that approach. And again, just like baseball, it's like baseball's finally looking at making some changes, a pitch clock, and getting the DH in both leagues and all this. Baseball's been really slow on doing that, where the other sports have been pretty progressive. And it shows in the overall perception. And unfortunately, I see radio in that same light, that we got to flip the switch and try to get a little bit more up to the times on how things are, whether it's recruiting talent, how we position ourselves, in radio as a whole too. And I would like to say the opinions of Doug Smith on the panel do not necessarily reflect the opinions of DMR, its management, or staff. We have been really bad at the positioning. In sales, marketing, you're either positioning or you're being positioned. And the radio industry has been positioned into a corner for years, and we haven't come out swinging.
Yeah.
Everyone
Great
else,
point.
Spotify, man, they have put us as the old dinosaur back in the corner. And as an industry, and I can get on a soapbox, trust me, everyone in the office is like, oh God, here he goes again. But it's time for us to come out swinging. We're still getting listening. We're not dead. We're not, flatlined. We're still there. We just got to be better about it. And having a unified front as an industry, I still think, quite frankly, we could go kick some ass.
We only have a few minutes left. I want to move on from the
Hashtag eggplant. Join the revolution. We want all the creatives in this room and the industry and the academia to get together and show those bastards we're the smart, creative ones that are going to turn the tables and flip it back on them. You rock.
I want to take our final minutes to talk about at work, because historically radio has won that at work battle. But can we count on that to be the case going in the future? Has Nielsen seen anything? What should we be doing now to be winning what we win now pretty handily? How can we count on that, or are there things we should be doing now?
I think it all goes back to the strengths, the strengths of radio, and that is the local connection, the curation, the personality. Because if you think about it, look at Pandora and Spotify and all the streaming services. They spend a whole lot of money on data scientists and algorithms, and they don't spend a ton of money on talent. They're also not as profitable as radio. That's a big reason why. But that's one of the original things that sets radio apart. And we saw it in Larry's study yesterday about teens. They just don't even think that radio is a place to do that. It's the same music. You guys are playing relatively the same music that I could stream on Spotify or on Pandora. Maybe there's a little bit of difference. Maybe that algorithm is playing it a little differently. But in general, especially talking about country, you are playing generally the same music. So what's the difference? And what can you offer from a local radio perspective? And how can you remind people about that? I mean, fragmentation gives you an opportunity to work on your brand and your position, because if you don't, you will eventually be swallowed by the forces that are at play.
We have a question in the audience.
B-Dub, mediocre talent in Denver, Colorado. We talk about personality, we talk about talent. Sorry, I got to pick the mic up so I don't have to lean over. Until you stop the music in a music suite. And we talk about the attention span of people, but these same people are watching 30-minute long YouTube videos in some cases. So how do we as an industry, encourage talent to be talent? 8-second ramps sometimes is not enough time to get what you have to say. And then, we're encouraging talent, but then as an industry as a whole, don't stop the music. So how do you combine the two, besides 45-second long intros that you make when your boss isn't looking?
By the way, I think you're at least an adequate talent, just so you know. No, B-Dub a long time. I think that, remember that the being a personality isn't about just being on the radio. You can add all of that other pieces to it that build your personality brand, and the bigger it gets and you're building that pyramid or whatever form you'd like to put that in, you have the opportunity to make your footprint bigger. Right, Scott? I mean, you can make it bigger with all this other stuff.
Yeah, there's no limits to that. And the really, really great talent, and oddly enough, there used to be the liner card readers, but now when you take those 8 seconds, extraordinary talent can make those 8 seconds matter by delivering me something that will stick me through the next song and the next break. And that's even harder than if you have long free-form space. Right. I would argue that to really do that and make something matter in that short period of time is a lot more work, takes a lot more prep, takes a lot more energy to be great doing that and still live within the confines of what we have. I believe there are two types of programmers. There are the form guys, you said earlier, well, let's hit the top of the hour, but that, at the end of the day, I'm a substance programmer. I'm substance over form. Give me something entertaining that makes me connect with you, and I'll give you a break on, hey, you're a minute or two late here and there, because that's not gonna matter. So if you take and mold the two together, because we are held accountable, the science, whether we like it or not, the industry leader in standard is Nielsen, and there are some great things about it. There's some pitfalls, right? I mean, here's the guy. I want to hear about all the pitfalls, but so we're challenged. That's how we're measured. So we have to, create a balance between the two, and you can win with that. So
We're coming up on the end of our time. We have another question over here.
Just the one advantage, Bill Barrett from Eugene. The one advantage we have is that over all the other media is we can meet the listener face to face. So the biggest thing I think in personality radio is to get into the community. Everybody on the staff ought to be doing something with a local charity, a local organization, because that's what you're talking about on the air. All of a sudden, people know that you're a local radio station and you're involved. So for us, the key has been local involvement all the time. Thanks.
yeah, no, excellent point. And you think sometimes you don't have the resources. If you're still fortunate enough to have a receptionist in your building, you walk around and look at everybody has some sort of social engagement. It could be Twitter, Facebook, even old school stuff. Our receptionist in a couple of our facilities actually respond in between calls to listeners' comments from the brands, and they speak in the voice of the brand. So that's another resource. If you really rethink, it's not necessarily obvious. So it's rethinking how you use the resources you have, and if you work together as a team, it can really, really be spectacular.
Doug, you have any final thoughts?
I think it's just the opportunity to look at with all the data and however you want to perceive it is that radio is not dead. We have a great opportunity if we look at it in a positive light to realize where we're at this point in time, and we have to evolve in the sense of if we're talking about this younger demo, what's important to them, how to connect with them. And it's the idea that use you in your a heck of a lot more than you use I in me. So as an industry, if we're talking about us, they don't care about that. Really looking at this younger demo, what's going to connect with them? It's all about them. And if we can really start as a unified front as an industry to really start thinking that way and how to connect, they're still listening, but if we screw it up, we're going to be sitting here 10 years from now going, what the hell happened? So the opportunity is now to really zero in on that and take advantage of it.
The greatest ideas come from our youth. They always do in every industry. So the better we can collaborate and bring them into what we're doing. We, and I say everybody in this room in our business, have a lot of very bright and smart people that can figure out the solution to this. And so I'd like everybody in this room to give yourself a round of applause because you guys are the ones that are really the underdogs that haven't been recognized for a lot of the brilliance that you bring. And I encourage you, if you collaborate and we bring this together, and we've got an open forum here, #eggplant. We can communicate with you. We'd love all those ideas to come together, and together as a group, we create the solution of what is next. So give yourself a round of applause. Thank you for contributing to this wonderful medium we have of country radio.
John, you have any final thoughts?
I do. People use their smartphones and their televisions 6 days a week, and they use radio 5 days a week. That's the key. It's got to be a daily habit. Right? There's never been more audio used in the history of humanity than is being used right now. Streaming, podcasts, everything, right? Audio is everywhere. We use a ton of it every day. In order for radio to stay a part of that mix, it's got to be a habit. It's got to be a daily habit. That's one of the things you'll hear me say to PDs all over the country. Build your daily use. That's what matters.
Well, that's great. I want to thank the panel for being here today. Thank you guys for being here. Couldn't do the panels without you. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of your CRS.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.